journey to self-discovery. The sensation was of a steep fall, and in a jump he got out of bed. The sheets fell on the ground as he steadied himself, still panting. A melodious laugh sounded on the outside of the house. He walked to the balcony, trying to understand what had just happened, just to see that Arya was performing the Rimga. Eragon felt embarrassed with the realization that what he had experienced as a steep fall was in fact a progression from one pose to another, in swift and flowing movements of her strong body. Arya threw him a quick smile and finished the exercises. Crossing her legs, she sat down on the grass to work her mind as well. It was when their connection was interrupted. Eragon stretched his back as he watched her in silence. Then he leaned against a branch that worked as a pillar for the balcony roof. He closed his eyes and searched for Saphira, throwing his mind further as he failed to find her in the shelter with Fernan. She opened her mind to him as soon as she felt his presence in the arena. With her claws, she was digging the holes where the structure used in the jousts would be fixated. With an assured touch of minds, they greeted each other, and he retreated. It was a warm morning already, and he sensed that the day would be one of the hottest they had so far in that summer. Eragon breathed in the air, feeling content for waking up in the treehouse, despite the heart-racing way of doing so he just had. He was excited for the rest of his time with her, curious to discover all her manners and routines. After his morning hygiene, Eragon went to the kitchen to prepare the breakfast. He had stocked the pantry for her arrival with basic supplies such as bread, cheese, and tea that he put on the table for them. In the garden, however, it was possible to find various sorts of fruits, and that was what he did. He walked to the back of the house where the garden, and started to select the ones he wanted. He put the basket he carried on the bench and collected some cherries, peaches, and plums. He was ready to walk back when the sound of her steps made him stay where he was. She moved some vines out of the way and stepped her bare feet on the square where he was standing. "I'm sorry for the way I woke you up." Her mischievous smile told him she wasn't sorry at all. Eragon sat on the bench and waited for her to join him. Arya took a seat by his side and raised her chin to breathe in the morning air, much fresher there under the trees than by the river. "It's all right. I suppose there are worse ways to wake up." He really meant it. "I'll remember that," Arya said with a smirk. Eragon took his hand to her hair and let it glide throughout its extension, feeling the silky touch of it between his fingers. She closed her eyes with the contact. "Tell me," she looked at him again. "Do you regret coming with me last night?" If he regretted. He would be a crazy man if he did. There was no better way to fall asleep and then to wake up than to be by her side. Eragon kept the caress on her hair. "I can be accused of a lot of things, but I'm not crazy to regret being with you." He thought that those words were the exact response she wanted to hear, because in a much more tender way than in the day before, she moved to his lap. The kisses she gave him were calm and warm at first, but they soon reflected the urge they both had. Her nails grazed on the skin of his neck very softly, ripping a grunt from his throat. She smiled in his lips. Arya was leading the way just how she should, and he wanted her to. He wished one day he felt as confident as Arya to take the lead, but his confidence toward her was motivated almost always by impulsiveness, because if he took a minute longer to think about his actions, he wouldn't do any of them. Why was it, he wondered? Arya was confident enough to know what she wanted and conquer it, just the way she was leading him in to reflect her gestures. If she moved her hands down his back, he would glide his palms up her thighs. If she hunted his mouth like a predator, he would retreat like a prey. If her hands pulled up his shirt, his hands would pull down the collar of her tunic. Arya arched her back when she felt his lips brushing on her collarbone and neck. It caused her hips to move on his lap. He wasn't prepared for the longing that her simple movement created in him. Eragon's hands shot down to her hips to make her repeat it, so she would understand what he wanted. Arya looked in his eyes in an accomplice way, as she was partnering with him to make the fullest of their moments together. It was surprising to him how easy it was to simply forget about his problems and concerns when she enclosed him in her passion like that. Most of all, it was surprising to him that she was willing to leave it all aside to bring him to herself, since she had always been the reference of wisdom and rationality to him. But if he were to consider it further, he would be enlightened by the fact that if she was acting so passionately, it was only because she had thought of it with relentless care. Eragon was sure now that Arya had weighted him and all the possible consequences of their acts to find the right course of action. There was nothing improvised about her leadership. Arya was the perfect commander. That was when he relaxed in her arms and felt the elation of being held and pleasured by such brilliant person. He didn't know how she would conduct their interactions from that point on, but he hoped she knew he was ready for her to have complete intimacy. So his hands helped her move her hips at the same time. She captured his lips with hers. His moan was inevitable, such as her intensified reaction to it. Shadeslayer. Vernon's incredibly low voice startled him and made him grunt. "I'm sorry to interrupt." Really, the dragon seemed amused with the scene he found the riders in. From the intrusion in his mind, Eragon could vaguely perceive that Vernon had been communicating with someone else that wasn't Arya or Saphira. Eragon reunited some composure, but his voice came out trembled and hoarse. "Yes." He turned his face and laid his cheek on Arya's shoulder, trying to steady his breathing, but she kept moving on his lap and scratching his back. Considering the fact that now that her mouth was free, she started to kiss and bite his neck and shoulder as well. "Blurdgarm requests your presence in the arena. Apparently, there's a problem with the schedule. He said Saphira's is on her way to pick you up." He started to pant more intensely and groan at every little bite she wowed place on his skin. His hands tried to give more power to the movement of her hips, that even over their layers of clothes were intense enough to take his breath away. He was without any doubt distracted from the conversation. Couldn't he solve this by himself? A thought crossed Eragon's head. If Vernon was human, he would be either embarrassed or so amused to the point of laughing at them. Another thought accompanied the first one. Eragon was the one who should be feeling embarrassed by that. But it was Arya he had in his arms. He would never feel ashamed of having her so devoted to him like that, or for being so devoted to her like that. Arya grabbed his face and placed her lips on his ear. "Tell him you're busy." Her seductive voice made the hair on his chest stand up. Eragon took a deep breath so he could speak. "You are the one who always puts duty first. Tell me this. Should I neglect my duty now?" He whispered with the little strength he had after she resumed kissing his neck. She paused and stared at him. At once, she was reminded that her tunic was disheveled and fixed it by pulling the sleeve up to cover her shoulder. "You're the head rider. I'm sure there are others who can take on these minor tasks." She was serious, and in nothing resembled the affectionate lover of before. Arya would have been more successful in convincing him to stay if she had kept appealing to his desires instead of judging his role as the head rider. If she had decided that it was time and started to undress him, there was no chance he would let Blurdgarm interrupt them again. But she chose what they did best, fighting. He didn't want to oppose her, though, not when they were being so passionate with each other. He removed his hands from her hips and placed them on each side of her face, just in time to see with the corner of his eyes as Saphira approached the river to land by the house. "The time will come for me to be just a rider. For now, my duty includes all these minor and boring quests. Can you forgive me for leaving you?" His sweetness softened her fighting disposition as she half smiled and inclined to kiss him on the lips. "I have to go now." Eragon added when they parted. "Stay," she demanded. "For one more kiss." He watched her desire burn in her morning green eyes once again as she requested him. He was desired. The woman he loved, like he would never love no one else, desired him. That feeling could never be described or compared. He grabbed her by the thighs and stood up, paying no mind to the audience of their partners. They were constant audience anyway in their minds, even when they tried to give each other their privacy. Then, he laid her on the bench and weighed on her between her legs. Attacking her lips with his, he started to kiss her with a hunger she was all ready to experience coming from him. At the same time, his hands went under her tunic, raising it to her stomach. His fingers studied her burning skin without never stopping the kiss. She was sculptured to perfection, soft honey skin over the firmest muscles. Their tongues swirled around each other, and at times he would retreat his just to make her gasp in his mouth looking for him. It was electrical, and it felt like it had been 1,000,000 years since they've been locked in that embrace. But the first grains of sand hadn't passed through the narrowest space of the hourglass yet, when he laid the softest kiss on her lips for the last time before standing up to leave. She still had her eyes closed and erased breathing when she heard Saphira's wings flapping to raise her body from the ground. Arya looked up and watched the pair fly away toward the mountain, her heart pounding in her ears and a heat emanating from between her legs. "I can pick you up and drop you in the river if you wish." Fernan came close to her and nudged her hand that she had dropped from the bench with his snout. "Shut it. It works for me." He mocked and lay down on the grass. "I said shut it. I'm just saying." "You will have to take care of that heat of yours, because soon you will be taking irrational decisions, like telling your dragon to shut up." His mental laugh echoed through their bond. "Heat? I don't have a heat, She hesitated. "What?" In love, she didn't respond. "Why do you have trouble speaking the words even mentally, even to me?" "I know you think of it. I know you love him. Your true name shows it, and he knows your true name. So why don't you say it?" Arya lifted herself up, sitting on the bench and adjusting her tunic that Eragon had ruffled up before with his prying hands. "The last time I did." She used her voice to talk and hesitated again to the sound of it. "It was hoarse and low. Continue." "I have only seen it in your memories, but you haven't talked about it yet." She cleared her throat and ran a hand through her hair, a habit she realized she could be picking up from Eragon. "Walk with me. But be careful. Eragon won't like it if you destroy his flowers. His flowers. His flowers, my garden." "A good compromise, I think." She shrugged. They reached the point where Eragon had planted the copy he had made of the Black Morning Glory, extracted directly from the memory he had of walking through the gardens of Tealdari Hall. "The first time I told Ferlin I loved him, it came out easily. I was young and completely raptured by him. Not even my mother had heard the words coming out of my young lips yet, but he had." And he laughed. Not in mockery, but he was so sure of himself, like it was so obvious to him that I was going to fall. It filled me with anger. She sat on the ground by the flower as Fernan tried to adjust his vast body the best he could without damaging the vegetation. Not long after that, she continued. "He said it for the first time. We were innocent companions, the best of friends. But I was proud and didn't say it back. I didn't say it back for many years, even when I wanted to. It didn't matter how many times he would say it to me, even when he made me this." She traced the petals with her fingers as it was the face of a loved one. "What made you say it again?" Fernan asked, inspecting her expression, but also her emotions. She knew he had an idea of all that had transpired, but he wanted to hear it from her. Arya took a deep breath. "I thought I was going to lose him." Her eyes stung. She felt Fernan approaching her the best he could to touch her forehead with his nose. He had gone in a scout mission under Ajihad's command. At some point, he stayed behind to cover their tracks, but he was taking too long to rejoin the group. They decided to go looking for him. He had been attacked by 3 Urgles. They were young and inexperienced, so Ferlin managed to kill them all and survive, but barely. When he was brought to Trondheim, all I could think about was that he was going to die without me telling that I loved him. So I did. Fernan made a grunting noise in the back of his throat that Arya couldn't recognize, even being linked mentally to him. She looked at him and saw what she could only describe as indifference. "Fernan, what you asked for the story, and now you're bored and uninterested." That's a beautiful story, Arya. But I just don't see how it has anything to do with Eragon. He was somewhat embarrassed. If you love someone, you tell them. It amazed her how simple life could be under the rationalization of a dragon. For Fernan, she created more monsters than she could fight. Have I finished telling it already? Arya creased her eyebrows and said it in a severe manner. All right, go ahead then. I'm listening. Arya looked at the morning glory again and sighed, preparing to continue the tale. After that, time went by, and we started to grow apart. I realized we were different people, with certain similarities, of course, but different. We wanted different things. You stopped loving him. I don't know. All I know is that I stopped wanting him as my mate. We talked about it, but decided to give us another chance. So the last time he told me he loved me was the day of his death, as we stopped for the horses to rest. He hugged me because I was feeling anxious and said he would protect me like I was his precious possession for him to keep. It failed to calm me. Instead, I felt more anxious and annoyed. I ridded myself of his arms, and as he tried to hold me again and make me stay with him, he said he loved me. That was the moment I realized that the words were physically impossible for me to say back to him. I couldn't tell him a lie. He noticed and died heartbroken. I had never forgiven myself for it. Fernan stirred uncomfortable, and Arya sensed he had a reprimand coming her way. You really blame yourself for not loving him anymore. Do you know how absurd it sounds? Arya stood up and approached him, leaning against his nose. I know that I'm not the one to blame for his death, neither for stopping to love him. I know that. But I can't help the way I feel. Fernan involved her with a warm breath. This guilt is preventing you from committing, isn't it? If you don't commit, then it won't be your fault if you lose. Arya let herself fall, sitting on the ground between his front paws, and rested her head against his scales. How selfish am I, not selfish. Just hurt. His tone was loving, and Arya would be forever grateful she had Fernan in her life to support her. And how do you expect Eragon to know all this if you don't tell him? He planted Fairlin's flower here without knowing how much distress it would cause you, he knows. She said with tenderness, picturing Eragon's warm eyes. How could he possibility? He does. Arya smiled and caressed his neck. That's exactly why he planted the morning glory here, so hidden, just for me. If I don't know where my hurt comes from, and if I don't accept my past, I will never love myself or anyone else. Or at least it's what I took from it. The thought that Eragon would go to such length to heal her was disarming. When she was being selfish and protective of her own feelings, he was surrounding her with his selfless care. Arya felt her emotions bubbling up. She laughed a faint chuckle and wiped a tear that fell on her cheek. Oh, my dear, why do you have to be so hard on yourself? Fernan followed her line of thought and worried. Don't you have a clue? The image of Islanzadi popped inside her head like an explosion, infused with the dragon's conflicting emotions. Calm down, Fernan. That's how it works between a parent and their child. I'm sure if I have my own one day, they will have their complaints against me as well. It was hard for the dragon to forgive Islanzadi for antagonizing Arya for so long, but he also felt a daughter's love toward her mother. It was complicated, and he often would ask his partner about it. Arya would explain to him, and with time it became easier for her to understand and forgive her mother for the many controversial decisions she had made. All right, so you know yourself, but are still trying to accept your past. This much I get. But after that, do you think you can forgive Eragon as well? Arya raised her head to face him. Forgive him? For what? For being him. Fernan stood up and circled his body to lay down in front of her. For not being an elf. For being young. For not being noble. For not living in Elismera. What are you saying, Fernan? She was angry about being accused like that. She loved Eragon for everything he was, even if she couldn't say it to him yet. You have your prejudices, Arya. And the fact that he broke through them throws you off balance. Since you're evaluating which facts about yourself you have to forgive and accept, you should add those ones to your list. She raised her chin and looked away. Pride was taking the best of her. I accept those in him, which tells more about yourself than about him. Fernan said casually. What? Well, you just said it. If you accept you, love, she whispered. Fernan looked presumptuous. You should tell him. Not yet, Arya. Not yet, Fernan. He knows already. Besides, I need to know what idea he makes of commitment before actually committing. Fernan shook his head, and she could hear the amusement in his words. So you're willing to mate with him, to share a bed with him, to be seen with him in public, but somehow are afraid of commitment. Oh, my darling, I have some news for you.